Welcome back to my channel, Talented Reads. Today, I am going to be doing a pretty fun video. I got this cookbook called Castle Rock Kitchen last year, and it is recipes from the world of Stephen King books. So I thought it would be fun to pick some books out, and then read the book, find the references for the recipes in the book, and then when I find it, then I'll go to the cookbook and make the recipe. So I've found 6 books. There are several sections, so that works out to just about one book to cover a recipe from each section. So that gives me a wide variety of recipes to get a little taste of the cookbook. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. So my lineup is Hearts in Atlantis, The Dead Zone, Skeleton Crew, Revival, Salem's Lot, and Bed of Bones. Now, there is a recipe for baking and sweets, which I'm still undecided if I want to do that section. If I decide to do that section, there'll be one more book, and that book is, I think it's Lizzie's Story. So, yeah, we'll see if I get to that, though. But yeah, so I thought we would go book by book and read and cook. I'm very excited. If anyone knows me, I love to collect cookbooks, just as much as I like fictional and non-fiction books. So yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of references there are to the recipes in the book. I have read quite a few Stephen King. All of these books here are unread, but a couple of these have been on my to-read list for quite a while. So I'm excited to finally have a chance to get to them. And I would say, of the ones that I've read, I don't recall food being a big part of it, but I guess that'll be a new experience if I come across that this time. So yeah, let's get started. Oh, and just to mention, this is going to be, I'm going to do this for the entire month of January, so it is officially January 1st. As I'm filming this. So yeah, we'll just be reading and cooking throughout January, and we'll see if I can get to everything. So let's get to reading and cooking. Woohoo! Alright, here we are for book 1, which is Skeleton Crew. The recipe references, this is a short story collection, and the recipe references one of the short stories. I went ahead and marked all of the short stories that are in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and read them all. But of course, I'll probably end up reading the short story that goes with the recipe first, which I believe is this one here, Grandma. But yeah, so let's go to the cookbook. We are in the breakfast section, and it is the Grandma's Crab Cake Brunch, which is the recipe that we'll make when we get to it in the book. So let's start reading the book. Okay, so the recipe is actually listed like right on the front page. So it says, after all, it wasn't like he was any six anymore when they had first come to Maine to take care of Grandma, and he had cried with terror whenever Grandma held out her heavy arms toward him from her white vinyl chair that always smelled of the poached eggs she ate. Cool. Let's go make our recipes. Alright, book 2 is Revival by Stephen King, which I haven't read. I've heard of it, but I've been very interested in reading it. It's kind of like a religious fanaticism with electricity, which is why there's the big bolt on it, which is kind of cool. When we get to the recipe, we are going to be in the dinner section, and the recipe that we'll make when we get to it is sloop, which, when I was looking at the recipe, I think is just kind of like a corn chowder. Does it look like corn chowder to everybody? I think it does. Cool. I'm excited. Let's get to reading. Alright, we came across our recipe reference. Here it says, Jenny, what did you have for supper last night? And she says, sloop and salad. Let's go make our sloop. Alright, I am finally getting to read Salem's Lot. I'm super excited about this one. This has been on my to-read list for Stephen King for a while. I know he references or gives credit to Dracula by Bram Stoker, which is my favorite book, so yeah, I'm really excited for this vampire novel. And as far as the kitchen, I believe we are in the supper section. Yep, we are in the supper section, and we need to be on the lookout for Matt Burke's Bolognese. I love me a good spaghetti sauce, especially bolognese, which has meat sauce. So, yes, let's look out for that. Let's get to reading. Okay, so I got to the part that references our recipe. Says, Matt came out of the kitchen outfitted in a red and white checkered apron. The odor of spaghetti sauce wandered out after him. Spaghetti sauce. Alright, let's go make our dinner. Alright, we got Bad Bones, which is another thick book. Stephen King, you're killing me. Yeah, I actually haven't heard a whole lot about this book. I'm not too familiar with this one, but the cover's pretty cool. This is the Halloween edition of his book, so yeah. And then the recipe, I think we're in the seafood section. Yep, fish and shellfish. And when we get to it, we are going to be making shrimp tetrazzini, which sounds interesting. And I was looking at the recipe. I mean, I admit that looks pretty darn good. Pasta with shrimp. Yum. Cool. I'm excited. So, let's start this bad boy and make our shrimp dish when we get there. Okay, I didn't do a very good job of updating you. Oh, this lighting's killing me. That's a little better. I didn't do a very good job of updating you as I was reading it. I wanted to get a big chunk of it in, and then I ended up being like really invested in it, so I just kept going. But I did mark the page that I found the recipe on, so let's reference that and then we'll go make the recipe. So it says he'll still be here, or still be there when Key's kids are old enough to try buying beer with fake IDs, unless someone wanders in off the road and asks for something like shrimp tetrazzini. If that happened, he'd probably drop dead of a heart attack. Alright. Yay! Let's go make our recipe. top it with cheese, but honestly, if I put any more cheese in this thing, my stomach's gonna have a hard time processing it. But oh, it looks so good. Didn't update as good on this one, but this one book had 2 recipes in it, so I thought I would just wait until I finished the book and then found both mentions of the recipes. So the first recipe is there it is. It's that Herb was watching Dunny eat string beans seriously, one by one, using all 6 of his teeth on them. So I did make the string bean recipe, or the green bean recipe, so let's cut to that clip. Alright, and then the second recipe from this is the waitress returned with Johnny's tea and chili. He tasted the chili and nodded at Benjamin. You're right, it's good, especially on a night like this. So I have to make the chili recipe. So let's go do that. All right, we are on the last book, Hearts in Atlantis, which is still another thick boy. This is going to cover the last section we have here, which is drinks and cocktails. And I'm going to be making the iced red tea when I get to it in the book. So it's a lovely day out for reading. I think I'm gonna sit out in the living room and get some reading in. So yeah, let's see how far I get, and I'm curious to see where that reference is. Yeah, let's get to reading. Alright, I came across the reference in the book. It says, my dad put a kiss on my cheek, hugged me with one arm, and then shuffled to the fridge for a glass of mom's red tea. So, cool. I'm gonna finish my chapter, and then if it's tea, it probably has to brew for, I don't know, not that long, I guess. But we'll make it nonetheless, and I can drink some today and drink some tomorrow. So, cool. Let's go make tea. Alright, we have officially come to the end of our Castle Rock Stephen King cooking and reading vlog. So I just wanted to do a final thought and wrap up. So as far as the cookbook goes, there's a lot of recipes that I saved in here to make, that I did not get a chance to read the book. So I'm excited to, cook some more recipes from this. I thought the recipes were very easy to follow. The ingredients were like nothing fancy, so they were accessible. Most of it is like something I normally buy, so it's not like I had to, run to the store for some things. I think as far as the recipes in relation to the references in the book, I mean, obviously, like Stephen King's books don't have the exact recipe in them. So, you kind of have to use your imagination on a lot of it, obviously. But I think, the main references are there. They talked about having green beans, and so she came up with a green bean recipe. I mean, talked about sauce, so she came up with bolognese sauce. I mean, yeah. So, the only one that I think took a little bit of a stretch was the crab cakes. That, to me, was the least sensible, I guess, with what I read in the book to what the recipe was. But, I mean, everything that I made out of this book was very yummy. I really like the fact that Stephen King himself wrote the foreword. And obviously, he was born in Maine, and like all of his books take place in Maine. So, his books are steeped in Maine culture and food. And I never, to tell you the truth, I never noticed how many food references there were in his books before taking on this little vlog activity. But there's quite a few references. There were even some in the books that I marked, like, to make myself. One of the recipes talked about, going to the fair, so there was mentions of, like, hot dogs and having people over for dinner. There were casseroles, steaks on the grill. I mean, there's a lot of food references in here besides what I was searching for the recipes. So that was really cool. And I thought it was really cool, again, that Stephen King wrote the foreword, because, again, this is kind of like a homage and tribute to a lot of his books. And he talks about his love for food, and of course food from the area that he was born in and grew up in, and that's where his heart is, and the heart of a lot of his books. So that was pretty cool. As far as the sections, I think they're pretty standard for cookbook sections. They had, I would say, tried to grab one from each of the sections. However, the baking and sweets, I did not do. As much as I love sweets, I'm trying to not eat sweets, and I just am not a very good baker. So I opted not to do anything from that section. And then, of course, basics. There was not like any food recipes, so I didn't do anything from that. Let's talk about the book. books that I read. So first was Skeleton Crew, which is actually a short story collection. This is the collection that originally had The Mist in it, which I've read as a standalone book. I didn't realize it was part of a short story collection. I didn't opt to reread it in this, but of course I read Grandma first because I wanted to get that so I can make the recipe, and then the rest of the short stories I read after that. I gave the whole collection 3.5 stars. There were quite a few that I thought were just okay. Some of my favorites were Beach World, Survivor Type, Morning Deliveries, the short story Grandma, which I read for the thing. I actually gave 5 stars. I really enjoyed that. And then The Raft was another one that I liked. So, yeah. I'm happy to have read this. I know he's got some other short story collections. It's funny because when I think Stephen King, I don't think short story or novellas because he's known for very thick writing and books. So it was nice to read a short story collection. I would definitely pick one up again. So yeah. Again, that was for the breakfast recipe in here, which was the crab cakes. The next one that I read was Revival, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a kind of religious, fanatic kind of book. It follows a young boy who basically becomes friends with the new pastor in the small town that he grew up in, and some tragic event happens and the pastor ends up kind of leaving the town, but as this boy has grown up into adulthood, he's kind of come across him several times, and the big lightning bolt, the pastor has a fascination with electricity, so that plays a big part in the religious fanatic part of it. So yeah, I really like this book. Again, I gave it 4 stars. It was more of a light horror. You know, when I think Stephen King, again, I think of the kind of darker horror, but I will actually say most of what I read was not dark horror. So, yeah. And I read this for the sloop recipe, which was part of the dinner section in the cookbook. Next I read Salem's Lot, which I'm so happy I finally got to. It's been on my list of Stephen King to read for a while. I know it's one of his older books, and I'm so happy to have read it. I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. This is set in Jerusalem's Lot, which everybody, the locals call Salem's Lot. And it is a vampire novel, which I do love my vampires, so it was great. I read this for the bolognese recipe under the supper section in the cookbook. And next I read Bag of Bones, which I gave 4 stars. This one I would actually consider darker because of the subject matter. There's a pretty horrific rape scene, of a black woman, and so of course there's a lot of verbiage and language and slavery mentioned, and the subject matter is very hard to read. But the ghosty stuff is kind of cool. Yeah, I really liked this. Even though the scenes were obviously hard to read, I did give it 4 stars. And actually, I guess I would consider Salem's Lot more of that darker horror that you associate with Stephen King, because there's some pretty graphic, bloody, gory scenes, which I so appreciate with a vampire novel. Anyways, yeah, so Band of Bones, I read that one for the... Ooh, which one was that for? Oh, that was for the Shrimp Tetrazzini. So, not my favorite book, but my favorite recipe. Yeah, so that was really good. And I thought this was probably the closest reference to the recipe, because they actually specifically said Shrimp Tetrazzini in the book. So that's cool. Next was The Dead Zone. This was another kind of coming of age story, kind of more of a like psychic ability. This kid refers to his psychic visions as the Dead Zone. Yeah, I actually made two things out of here. There were two references for the vegetarian, which was the chili recipe, and then the side dish, which was the green beans. This book was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was, I don't think it's a favorite Stephen King of mine for sure, but still enjoyable. I kind of wrap this one up with The Stand for some reason. These two are kind of like similar references in my mind, so now that I've read The Dead Zone, I feel like I have to read The Stand at some point this year. So I put a dent, quite a bit dent, in my Stephen King reading this year. I've been behind for a while, and a lot of these have been on my to-read list for some time, so I'm glad I've had this opportunity to knock out some Stephen King books. And lastly, which was another sizable book, was Hearts in Atlantis, which was actually a book of 5, they said 5 novellas, but I mean, the book is sizable, so like, they're still pretty long novels, but they're 5 kind of interwoven stories. There's a lot of reference of like wartime in here. There is kind of like a coming of age of this young boy, and then kind of a psychic ability again. Kind of similar to The Dead Zone, but not really. There's these people in yellow coats that have come for them, and if you read the book, this lost sign and this symbol and this kind of town thing is very representative of the story. Again, not my favorite. I gave it 3 stars. To me, I think part of the problem is I associate Stephen King with stuff like It, Carrie, Pet Sematary, like a lot of the really darker stuff. So his dip into more of this kind of lighter stuff is just okay for me. You know, I consider it very fluffy. But, you know, the guy knows how to write a story, so I give him credit for that. But yeah, so that is everything. So I read... Oh, this is going to damage my little things, isn't it? Oh. So I read 6 Stephen King books, and made 5 recipes out of the book. So yeah, that's a wrap up on my vlog. I'm very happy with how this turned out. I do have more recipes, like I mentioned, to read in the book, so maybe I'll do a round 2 and pick some different Stephen King books and make some more recipes, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, let me know if any of you have read the Stephen King books. Maybe let me know if any of these are part of your favorites, or if you've ever had a chance to cook out of the cookbook. Also let me know if you'd be interested in a part 2. I think that is a possibility for the future. So yeah, thanks for checking out my vlog, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.